that this is digital humanities. Okay. So thank you for having me. I'm Alice. I'm an artist and archaeologist, and I specialize in science communication. So this ranges from traditional reconstruction painting and illustration to 3D modeling and animation, some 3D scanning, and occasionally some filmmaking as well. As you can see, I also dig in the field. Believe it or not, these two images are summertime in Greenland, but you'd be forgiven for believing they were winter, at least one of them. So I've mostly been working with communities in the Arctic over the past couple of years in Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. And through my work, I've been exploring practices of co-design and co-curation. And looking at how we can use creative digital media to engage people, particularly source communities, so Indigenous communities, with collections in new and interesting ways. And today I'm going to talk through a couple of examples where I've been working with Indigenous objects in museum collections. So the first example is quite a neat little case study, and this is focusing on a kayak from Perth Museum back in Scotland. So for this project, the museum was moving to a new premises, and it was setting up its new permanent exhibitions that were including this Inuit kayak. So we were commissioned to design a touchscreen with a 3D reconstruction of the kayak that visitors could interact with. So the first task was to identify where it was from. As you can see from some of the kind of clippings here, there was very limited information about this kayak other than it had been donated in 1824. And the accession records also contained kind of quite outdated terminology and information with it. So luckily for us, kayak styles across the Arctic are very distinctive depending on the region. So with a little help, we were able to quite quickly identify it as most likely coming from Baffin Island in Nunavut in Canada. But of course, we had a problem that we want to fully reconstruct the kayak in 3D, including the frame. And there's only so much information that you can gather by sticking your head inside, which is what I was doing in the first image there, to see the inside of the kayak and kind of try to understand the frame. And of course, historic photos that we can look at are helpful, but it's still a little bit hard to see some of the details. And it's quite easy to misinterpret, I think, from a 2D image as well. So we needed some specifics of regional styles. So we reached out firstly to the Kayakut Society in Iqaluit in South Baffin. So just a little bit of background, the society was formed in 2016. And it was formed with support from the Inuit Heritage Trust with the aim of revitalising the cultural practice of kayak building and also hunting from kayaks, skills that had almost been forgotten in the region. So this is Ashevak, and he's one of the young kayak builders leading the society, and he was taught the Baffin style of kayak building by an elder from the nearby town of Kimmerit a couple of years ago. And he's now himself teaching kayak building to some of the local youth in Iqaluit and also traveling around and doing kayak building workshops in other places. And when we approached him about joining our project to reconstruct the Perth kayak in 3D, he was very enthusiastic. And we were both, I think, quite excited about some of the potentials of using the 3D model also as a resource in his kayak building teaching workshops. So the collaboration itself was a lot of fun. I would send Ashevak kind of drafts of my very basic 3D models of the kayak frame, and he would pick over some of the details. And then he'd video call me from his workshop in Iqaluit to show me details of the boats that he was working on. and just try to talk through a couple of steps in the practicalities of the process as well, which really helped me in my process of imagining what the frame of this kayak in the museum would look like under the skin. The kayak from the Perth Museum was actually built slightly differently to the boats that Ashevak was building. I think it's probably a slight regional difference between North and South Baffin. So we worked together to try and interpret kind of the shapes that we could see under the skin of the museum kayak. And this was mostly in the areas where we were kind of working blind, so in the stern and the bow as well. So this was a final result. Nowadays, kayaking, of course, it's mostly recreational, so people aren't really using it for hunting anymore. But these boats originally were for hunting. And once the frame was completed, we were looking at the deck again and thinking, well, this looks very bare. So again, working together with Ashevak, I modelled up some of the regionally appropriate hunting equipment to be mounted on the deck. Now I know what you're thinking after that whole process of going through, oh, hello, and working out what the kayak frame should look like under the skin of the museum kayak. We're kind of covering it again with the digital skin and with the hunting equipment. But of course, the beauty of working digitally in 3D is that we can do things with the digital model that we couldn't possibly do with the real artifact. So this is the final touchscreen display that Ashevak and I worked on for the 3D reconstruction. And this can be exploded to see the frame and the individual components. So again, not something that museums are usually happy for you to do with the real objects. So the touchscreen was programmed in Unreal Engine. So this is a gaming engine by Kieran Baxter, who's sat right there. And we also added some final touches, like placing the kayak on the water and adding the hunter, which I think just helped bring the kayak, which, you know, spent many of its retirement years in a dusty museum storage facility, just kind of bring it back to life. The annotations are in Inuktitut and in English. And the curator text was also co-written with Ashevak in Iqaluit. And I think, you know, not only does this describe the historic use of the equipment, but this also includes some anecdotal stories and kind of observations from Ashevak about his own experiences building these boats and also paddling these boats out on the water. And I think breathing life back into museum pieces like this is important, not just to give visitors, you know, a more engaging experience and something fun to play with in the museum, but also to demonstrate that, you know, Indigenous traditional knowledge isn't just something from the past, but it's very much part of living cultures today. So we were able to kind of bring that all together through this example. So that was one object. But what if there are thousands of objects, which is the case with my next example that I'm going to talk about. So this is an archaeology project that I've worked on over the past, I think, almost 9 years now in Alaska. And we're excavating a pre-contact, so pre-contact being pre-colonization, Yupik sod house on the Bering Sea coast. The project itself is a collaboration with the local Indigenous community in the modern village of Quinahawk. And it was actually the Native Village Corporation themselves that first reached out to archaeologists to come and excavate the site after kind of climate changes in the region started to impact more and more with permafrost melt and coastal erosion. So locals were finding artifacts just kind of eroding out and washing up on the beach. So the excavations themselves began in 2009. And this was on the understanding that this was being done to rescue and safeguard the material from Nunathluk for younger generations, so that they can connect with their Yupik heritage and the sense of well-being and belonging that comes with Northern cultural identity. The community are very involved in the project. not only in kind of the running of the project, so the behind the scenes stuff, but also elders are frequently coming to join us down at the site to see what we're finding and help with the interpretation. And we always have local volunteers, really of all ages, coming into the field with us as well, digging and also helping process artifacts in the museum. So there's this real sense of kind of shared processes of discovery and interpretation. So artifacts from the excavations are housed with the descendant community in Quinahog itself, in the Nunathlak Museum, and this was established in 2018. So it works as half the building is a field lab for when we're digging in the summer, so we can process artifacts on site. We don't have to take them away for conservation. And the other half is a collections room and kind of small museum. The collection being housed in Quinahog obviously is a big deal for the region, and it makes a really powerful statement, I think, about Indigenous cultural sovereignty. So the museum houses the largest collection of pre-contact U-pick material in the world, and not only do we need to ensure that the community has the means to keep it conserved and protected, but we also want to ensure that this amazing cultural resource can, of course, be accessed by other U-pick communities and other researchers kind of elsewhere in the world as well. So because the collection is based in Quinahog, which, I mean, by all accounts, is quite remote. There's no road system to Quinahog. You have to fly there or you have to take a boat. And it takes a long time and it's quite expensive. The planes as well, you have to take a couple of flights and the planes just get smaller and smaller and smaller until you're sat next to the pilot. So by those accounts, it's quite remote. And a lot of the focus, because of this, has been in creating digital outreach materials for remote access to the collection, and kind of getting as much of the collection online as we can. Historically, Indigenous people around the world have been afforded very little agency in the practices of archaeology and ethnography. So for us on this project, it's really important to create spaces which bring balance to the various types and sources of knowledge, and offer different ways maybe to engage with the archaeological material. So although the excavations themselves are a great way to engage the community and to help people understand what we do as archaeologists and what those processes are, I think digging itself probably offers the least opportunity for kind of knowledge co-production and more of a balanced collaboration because we're governed by Western scientific protocols and standards. And ultimately, we want to ensure that the story of the archaeology is being told in a way that is still relevant to the community in Quinahog today, and that's done in a way that the community are happy with. So one of the main ways that we've been doing this is through co-designing and co-curating educational material together. So unlike digging, these are more the types of spaces that can be more easily experimented with, and new and kind of more creative methodologies can be explored. So at the moment, we have 2 online digital resources, and the content for each of these resources has been co-designed and co-curated with the local community and the archaeologists. So the first one was the Nunathlak educational resource. This was finished in 2019. This is very much a kind of children's resource. So it was made for local schools in the region, and it was distributed, I think, to 30 different schools in the Yukon-Kuskokwim region. And it's since been incorporated into the curriculum, which is great. And then the second resource was the Nunathlak Digital Museum and Catalogue, and that came out in 2023. This was more focused kind of broadly a more international audience. So it's got 2 halves. It's got a catalogue that you can search. The collection is around, I think we're approaching 200,000 artifacts now. the catalogue has 6,000. Some of those are 3D scanned. A lot of them are photographed. We're working on adding more and more as we can. And then the other part of the digital museum is a kind of digital exhibition that you can explore around and see reconstructions of life in the past at Nunavut. And it's curated through the different seasons as well. So those resources are freely available and they're online. But at the moment, with the most recent work, we're focusing back on the physical museum itself. So in a village of 750 people, we aren't maybe so concerned with getting huge numbers of visitors through the doors of the museum. But instead, we're more focused on supporting and encouraging repeat visitors coming to the museum, and particularly from the local school. So we're trying to get teachers to kind of be taking classes in more and more often, and really using the museum as a resource. So after the past year, over the past year, I've been working with the community to co-curate. It's really a small exhibition in the museum, so it's only 5 drawers, but it's a very big collection that's quite overwhelming in the collections room. So having 5 drawers curated is quite nice and neat. And this is paired with a touch screen, so it's kind of like an interactive digital guide. And we are also working on companion classroom lesson plans as well that are for the local school and are about the different themes that we cover in each of these drawers and on each of the screens of the digital guide. So like the online resources, the touchscreen guide has a strong focus on multivocality. So it uses sound bites, video, and interactive 3D media to share the story of the excavations and the interpretations of the collection. It looks a bit weird how I've laid it out just now. It's for a touchscreen, so each of the pages is scrolled along, so it looks very long. But I just finished these this week and I was very excited about it, so I wanted to see them all together. So it's curated into 5 different themes that respond to key finds that come from the excavations, and also interests that have been expressed by the local UPIC community. So the first one is focused on subsistence. So this is still subsistence-based lifestyles are still practiced by people in the community today. People are always out hunting, fishing, gathering on the land. So this is something that's really intrinsically connected to people's experiences today. The second one is focused on, it's called We Pass on Knowledge, and it's focused on intergenerational teaching. And this is something, again, that's very central to kind of UPIC worldview today. And there's still a lot of people in the community who practice traditional skills like skin sewing, carving, and kind of making toys and things like this. So that's a really nice point of connection kind of with contemporary society. Pre-contact UPIC society. So this is very much coming out of the newest finds from the excavations. So we're looking at UPIC society in the past, but also UPIC identity as individuals today and as a community. So this deals with a lot of kind of different themes through this page. We also have the page Our World is Changing, focuses on climate change and cultural resilience. So obviously there's a lot of impacts of climate change happening today with the local communities. There was Typhoon Hanlong in October that's wiped out 2 UPIC communities, not Quinhagak, luckily. There was a lot of damage done there. But 2 communities have had to completely relocate, and a lot of them are staying in Anchorage now because of flooding and kind of storm surges. This also completely wiped out most of what was left of the archaeological site. So there's artifacts kind of all over the beach again. So this is something that's very current, that's happening to people. But what people were saying in the feedback groups and focus sessions when we were designing this was that they don't want to be seen necessarily as climate change victims, because UPIC people have lived in this region for thousands of years, and they will continue to live in this region for thousands more years. We've seen archaeologically that people respond to climate changes that have been happening as well. So although it's important to tell the stories of the awful things that are happening, we also are including in this section stories about building climate change resilience as well. And part of that is the community rescuing the archaeological site and excavating. And then the final one is focused on traditional, and I'll talk a little bit more about that one in detail in a second. So just to give you a quick example of how it works. So as I say, it's a touch screen. It's kind of like an interactive infographic. So you can scroll through, you can click on, you pick words to hear the pronunciation of how they should be said. We have lots of illustrations and reconstructions. You can click on the illustrations of the artifacts, which is what will be in the drawers next to the touch screen. So you can find out more information about what they are. These are also paired with little sound bites from people in the community. So we've interviewed a lot of hunters, a lot of carvers and other people about the different objects. And so those sound bites are in there. We also have contemporary stories. So we've got some photo stories and things. So on this page, this is the subsistence scene. So got lots of people talking about going out and practicing subsistence now. So again, trying to kind of bring the past and present together. And video clips. We also have reconstructed 3D models, and I'll show some examples of those as well. And then in the climate change one is the one that's above there, a little sample from that. We have kind of interactive infographics, so you can click through to see how permafrost melt is affecting the site and how erosion occurs and how an archaeological site forms and then is destroyed. So those kinds of things. So I think initially, when we were looking at how to include the community in the curation of these digital resources, when I first joined the project in 2017, I was working on the children's resource, and up until coming to Alaska for the first time, I'd been reading all of these amazing, richly illustrated books from Anne Feinup Riordan and others. And I was thinking, you know, I'm going to come to this community and everybody's going to know everything about all of these artifacts. And people do have a lot of knowledge about these things. But a lot of these books were written kind of 20, 30 years ago. And, you know, the ways that they're kind of working in collections and describing the objects and their use in detail, it's coming from firsthand knowledge. And of course, today, most of these texts, as I say, are kind of 20 or 30 years old, and the majority of elders in Quinnahaug are just 1 or 2 generations apart from that kind of immediate knowledge. So elders today will often caveat conversations with, well, you shouldn't be talking to me, you should be talking to this person who's, you know, died 20 years ago. And I do think it's important to acknowledge this shift in the nature of community-based knowledge. From being firsthand to being kind of more handed down or through contemporary evolutions to kind of adapt the resources that we're creating and the ways that we're engaging people in creating material for these resources in a way that just ensures that everyone can meaningfully still take part. And one route towards this has been looking at contemporary practices, which still share very tangible parallels with activities that are present historically at Nunavik. So things like carving, skin sewing, making crafts, and of course, subsistence-based practices. So just as an example of how we started to do this, we were working with community members and we would have them choose an object or a selection of objects from the collection to begin to tell stories about or share experiences that were kind of inspired by looking at these objects. And then we started to design the media in parallel to accompany their stories. So this example here is a needle case. You can see in some of the images there, this is the types of things that we find on site. So very fragmentary, not the whole object. So it's also nice to be able to put the different components back together and show how it would work. So we can animate it to show that the little end comes out, and then you can protect your needles on the little kind of strip of fabric, and that's how it works. And then you can tie the end around your belt. So with the example here, we were working with Sunita and Catherine, who are in the images here. And they are really interested in particularly in the sewing tools from the collection. They make a lot of their own clothing now for themselves and their families, but also to sell. So Catherine makes contemporary cusbucks, which are these kind of traditional garments. And Sunita makes everything out of sealskin. So she makes little baby booties, kind of clothing. She also makes lots of kind of little sealskin ornaments and things. So she even makes like little sealskin sloths and things. So definitely not found in Alaska, but they're very cute, and she sells them on Etsy. But she's still using traditional knowledge, traditional skills to make these things with sealskin and other materials. So we curated these artifacts that were kind of paired with some of these stories and sound bites or quotes from working with Sunita and Catherine. So this approach was not only used in kind of choosing and curating the artifacts that would be in the exhibition, but it also fed into the sod house reconstruction. So these were also collaboration. So as well as working with the archaeologists in the field, I also spoke with elders like Joshua and Emily Cleveland, who are in the images here. And Joshua actually remembers staying in a sod house when he was a kid, because they still use one when they went to fish camp when he was very young. So although the site plans and participating in the excavations helped me understand what a sod house at Nunathlak should look like, Joshua could help me understand what it should feel like. So we could also kind of incorporate those experiences into the final artwork for these reconstructions. And of course, we also have sound bites from those interviews that are included in the resource as well. And the other thing that we're doing here with the reconstructions, of course, is incorporating a lot of the artifacts from the collections into the reconstruction painting. So again, you're kind of seeing those objects in context. Yeah. I think although the kind of default approach when working on projects like this is to work with elders, and for good reason, there's a lot of knowledge there. We also wanted to include some younger generations in the processes of knowledge co-production for Nunathlak, and a method that's proved very successful in the past is art-based workshops at the museum. So at Nunathlak in particular, we found a lot of dance regalia, so things like masks, dance fans and drums. And we can see from the archaeology that in the past, dancing was this huge part of pre-contact Yupik life and belief systems. But following colonization and suppression by missionaries, dancing was almost completely lost in Quinnahoc for more than a century. So this is something that's very much seen a resurgence in the last kind of decade or so, particularly with the young people in the village. And a lot of them have themselves kind of grown up since 2009 with the archaeology project as well. So they've come to dig with us every summer. And they've been using the museum for their dance practices as well, and kind of taking inspiration from the collection and reigniting these practices of traditional dance in the present. They even wrote a new dance song about the archaeology project, which is fantastic. There's a video about it online. There's troweling motions in the song and finding an artifact and then realizing it's nothing and throwing it on the spoil heap. It's very good. They did a good job. So dance has been one of our main focuses for the art-based workshops, which they really take the archaeological collection as a starting point to inspire hands-on activities. So we've run workshops on traditional songwriting, drum making, cusbuck making, and dance fan making. So we've really, at this point, I think, kitted out the dance group with as much regalia as they could ever need for their dances. And these have been led by visiting culture bearers and also local craftspeople in the community. I think the workshops themselves create a very tangible connection to the material from Nunavut, while also creating space for local community, especially the younger generations, to kind of explore and begin to build a relationship with their cultural heritage through making and doing. And it also creates a forum for co-production of new knowledge through the learning and lived experiences of the participants, as they kind of design and make their own cultural objects that are inspired by the past and the present. And the workshops are also a really great method for co-curating content for the digital resources. So this is an example from the dance theme in the museum guide. So we have, again, photo stories from the workshops, videos from the dance group, all kind of intermingled with the archaeological collection and the interpretation of those. We also, again, have, I like exploding artifacts in 3D. So we have an exploding drum. But with this, we also have little video clips from the workshop. So you can see the different stages of the process of making the drum, from the skin to carving the handle. And there's little video clips from people in the workshop showing how to, if you ever wanted to know how to clean the fat off a walrus stomach, this is where you can find this information. So it also becomes a kind of teaching resource in this sense. And this has really helped creating a sense of shared ownership and co-curation of the outcomes for public outreach and sharing the story of Nunavut. So I'll kind of finish up here. I could go on for hours talking about all the different details of this, but most of this material is up online, so you can have a look yourselves. But I'll finish up with this thought. So Yupik and Inuit people across the Arctic believe that all things, living or inanimate, have Inua, or in Yupik, Ua. And we see it on the concentric circle designs on a lot of the earrings and other artifacts from the site. So we see it all the time at Nunavut. And in the Yupik worldview, Ua is the spirit, the soul, or the life force that's present in all things. So humans, animals, plants, weather, even inanimate objects like the objects from the collection. And I think museums can often make collections feel sterile and lifeless behind glass or packed away in storage facilities, as with my first kayak example. And I think this is why, especially in an Indigenous context, using digital media to curate meaningful interactions and facilitate community involvement in telling new contemporary stories alongside new archaeological findings and interpretations is really important in helping those objects keep them alive in people's minds. So I will finish there. Also on that point, I feel like I have to explain myself these days, but I do not use generative AI in my work. So all of the material that you saw today is made by humans, this human. And I think, given my last point as well, that this is really important because we're dealing with human stories. So I think it's important to make material that is made by humans. So that is my email address, and you can explore the digital museum at nunavut.org as well. Any questions? No, you don't have to. It's not mandatory.
Interesting, thank you. I'm actually from the Information Science Department. My name is Jenny Johnstein.
Oh, okay.
And information science, it really goes into libraries, archives, museums, and the collections. And I've been working with co-creation, collaborative processes, more from the library perspective,
Nice.
with
Yeah.
various user groups. And I wanted to see how it played out here. We're going in on a bit with University of Tallinn or Tallinn University. And it is, I have to remember the title, it's Immersive Technologies and Cultural Heritage in Gaming.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
there's a few elements that are coming together. We don't have it's coming together. We don't have an entirely clear vision exactly what this game will look like. We brought in the museology department, and the topic will be something with looking at Viking heritage in different contexts, but I'm not sure how that's going to translate into the immersive technologies and games. So those details are very, very fuzzy on my part. Have you done anything with games? In cultural heritage, I have a hard time. I'm because we also want to have a co-creative element, sort of user perspectives on what they're seeing, what they're doing, and what it means to them. But yeah, your materials, I thought they look very nice and very interactive. Is there a game-like element in any of them? And yeah, or some process of exploration, or
it's more
feedback or something.
Yeah. It's, I guess, we're using a lot of gaming technologies in the material that we're producing, but not necessarily in the sense that there's like game-based play or kind of like goals or anything like you would have in a traditional game sense. So it's more that we're utilizing those technologies rather than the interaction being kind of game-like. It's more exploratory rather than kind of feeding back on the user's own experience in that way, I suppose. I work a lot with Kieran, and you're developing kind of more VR experiences now, mostly for glaciers, although you occasionally work with me in archaeology.
Yeah,
tempted away.
Yeah. A lot of that's come out of the interactive, so we've been working together on using them for touchscreen interactives, but then we have, I mean, even then the stuff that we're doing, we're a VR project, and it's a lot more involved. But it isn't really gamified, as you say. It's not
gamified, that's the term. Yeah.
So yeah,
I worry about the gamification.
Yeah, because you need like objectives and kind of
if the goal is to explore, there could be some setups, I think, and so I'm a little bit curious about it and a little worried about that it doesn't.
I mean, I think
it in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, even with your the painted mask, that which was has has some kind of feedback, and it's more, it's not just sort of navigating things. I mean, that was obviously like, it's quite difficult to navigate because of the open-endedness.
In the educational resource that we made first in 2019, there was an interface where so a lot of the masks that we find on site, they're just kind of look like plain wood now, but there is traces of pigment on it. So we made an interface where you could experiment with traditional pigments and kind of paint your own mask. So that was a kind of interactive, but not really gamified. But yeah, I mean, there's, I guess, the resources that we've been making through this project they're quite vast. So you can spend a lot of time in them, and you're not being kind of taken by the hand and taken through like you maybe would be in a curated exhibition where you're kind of going from one story to the next. You can kind of choose your own adventure in a little way of how you encounter the information, but I think that's about as far as we go with that. It would be fun to, but no, it's not something that I'm doing.
They're beautiful materials, and they look very interactive and very really it's the same with the exploration, and that's trying what's this about.
Exactly. And in the digital museum and the educational resource with the reconstructions, you can click on objects in the scene and bring them up and find out information about them and things like this. So it's kind of organized a bit more like you're encountering things and finding them yourself and exploring. So there's that element.
Well, do you collect some sort of feedback? Is there some sort of feedback mechanism that just so you can understand how this was perceived, or there's discussion points, or what significance this has for the
Yeah, so we've done we did some feedback particularly with the first educational resource in the schools, mostly about how the teachers were using them in different classes and things like that. And yeah, it was quite interesting actually, because we thought, we expected they would maybe use them in UPick language class, but they were also using them in social studies. The resources also, they were creating lessons around in their science classes and things like this. So that was nice to find out. It was a bit light touch. But we've in designing the lesson plans that are going with the newest guide. So we're working with a local teacher, Dora. She used to be the UPick teacher at the school, and with a couple of other people on the project as well. And we've been feeding back with the teachers based on the resources that we've already made, on what types of activities and lessons and things like that. So it's more that we're kind of using that feedback and focus groups to inform the next thing that we're making. Because there's so much material from this project as well. You could go on forever making stuff. So we're always kind of improving the next thing. So.
Feedback from the students.
The students, yeah, I mean, nothing profound. They're just having fun playing with it. More in terms of they'll kind of when we've done sessions with the students in schools, they'll spend a lot of time with the resource, which is really nice to see. But the most interesting thing to come out of it is when we're asking them, are there any other questions that you have? And they'll come up with things that we've never thought about, like asking about, life in the past and things like this. So again, that's something that we can kind of focus lessons on in the future and kind of feedback into it. So yeah, it's more that they have more questions rather than less at the end of these things. It's good. It's good. Okay.
I have a question, which is the 200,000 artifacts, is that a good number? And is that pre or post the typhoon? And
I think that's an estimate following the typhoon.
yeah,
Yeah.
are all of those artifacts now in the museum? And how is there any space left?
No, and there's not. No, there's it's definitely tight for space in there. But a lot of the artifacts, so Rick, who's the site director, got an emergency grant from the Anchorage Museum, and he went down the week after the typhoon, and him with a bunch of people from the community were kind of collecting huge tote boxes of artifacts, and bringing them into the museum. But then very quickly in the days after, the freeze happened, so they estimate about 10,000 artifacts still on the beach. That they couldn't get to in time. They're probably in the sediments and things like this. So yeah, so we're trying to get out there next summer. Yeah. So there's a lot, and it's just yeah, it's the site that keeps on giving. It's just we don't have space for everything. I mean, a lot of those 200,000 artifacts are arrow shafts and things, like thousands and thousands of broken arrow shafts, but there's in the 6,000 objects that we were able to put up in the digital museum, there's a lot of specific artifacts within that, so there's quite good representation across the board. But there's new material kind of coming out all the time. There's not enough time in the world to deal with this. But the sad thing is as well that, I mean, this is one site in the Arctic and this is happening everywhere. It's not just in Quinahawk, it's just that Quinahawk have an archaeology project. So yeah, it's pretty wild.
So I was super impressed. I mean, it's amazing work. And I was curious when you were saying this is not generated by AI, but it's generated by humans. How long does it take to make these kind of resources? So I was thinking of the 5 themes, resources that you were creating, and you were saying you recently finished. How long did that take?
So the most recent resource, we're reusing a lot of the reconstructions that I did for the digital museum as well, but it's still, I mean, to do a reconstruction painting, the actual time painting and drawing it is probably around a week, but then you're coming back in and doing edits when you're feeding back with the archaeologists and with community. So there's edit time of a couple of days to feed in. But there's all the research that goes in before you even kind of put pencil to paper as well. So it's, yeah, probably start to finish, the reconstructions take about 2 to 3 weeks to do, but then there's all the 3D models as well. I don't know, maybe my husband should answer this question because he's looked with me over the last 9 years of me doing these projects, and it's a long time.
Alice has been finishing this project for some.
Yeah. But no, it's it feels really meaningful to make this material though, I think, and seeing it get used in the community is worth it. all the all the hours that it takes. But yeah, and I think I've scanned maybe 600, 700 objects from the collection in 3D. A handful of those we've developed into the kind of animated models that are reconstructed and things like this. But that's been weeks in the field as well. So a long time.
The work.
Oh, yes. But no, definitely worth it. And also, I mean, I'm kind of talking about this, and there's so much to add to it, but there's a lot of people in the community and in other places that have been contributing to this as well. So we have our programmer, John Anderson, is based at the University of Dundee. So I do all the interaction design, give him all the media, and he makes all the buttons work and make it go online and things like that. We're also working with a local photographer, Jackie Cleveland. She's from Quinhagh, so she was working on a lot of the photo stories as well for the resource. And she knows everyone in the community. They're all her friends and family. So that's really nice to kind of see those stories come through her eyes as well. And we're working with Lonnie Strumpf in Quinhagh, he's actually Dora, who's the school teacher who's working on the lesson plans. It's her son. And he's amazing. He's a UPic linguist, but he's also a programmer. So he's been doing all the elements where you can click the words and hear the pronunciation. He's also made an amazing website called Juchtun.com, where it's not only like an interactive UPic dictionary for the language, but you can also do sentence builders and things like this. So we're trying to integrate more of Lonnie's work into these resources as well. So and then there's loads of people in the community that have been feeding into different aspects of the interviews and making films for us and various things. So there's a lot of people contributing.
Which I guess brings me to my next question. So you were mentioning focus sessions to decide what themes to focus on. But then once you have a theme, you've got so much that you can say about that theme. How do you exactly decide what goes into the resource? Is it?
I mean, a lot of it will be a balance between what artifacts are coming out of the site, what archaeological stories are coming out as well. So we'll kind of use those as key points to build material around this. And also kind of pairing that with what comes out of the focus sessions or one-on-one interviews with people and what people seem to be interested in. But I think a lot of this type of design work, particularly when you're making big resources, a huge amount of the time is spent on deciding what not to talk about because you could just go on forever. So yeah, it's definitely tricky, but it's just working out what the kind of strongest stories are to come out of this and what parallels the best with the archaeology and the contemporary stories that people are telling us in the community and kind of going from there. I think so.
Any more questions? Okay, so thank you again.
Thank you very much.